The morning mist rolled low over Camp 168, a former textile mill turned prisoner compound in the quiet English countryside. Laundry flapped from the wire lines like flags of surrender. Gray shifts, wool stockings, and hand-washed blankets, all frozen stiff in the chill wind. Anna Schultz stood near the fence, her fingers raw from the icy wash water. Beyond the barbed wire, she could see British guards moving with practiced calm, boots crunching over gravel, rifles slung, voices clipped but not cruel. It was census day, the one morning every prisoner dreaded. "They're coming for inspection," she whispered, barely moving her lips. Greta Hoffman didn't look up from the shirt she was wringing. Her knuckles had gone bone white. "I know," she said softly. The Red Cross was due to visit, a formality for most, but for Greta it meant everything. On paper, she was a widow. Her husband Klaus had been killed in Hamburg 8 months earlier, when the firestorm swallowed the city whole. But here in captivity, that single word, widow, meant less food, fewer privileges, and no chance of early release. Married women were prioritized for repatriation. Widows were simply warehoused. 3 nights earlier, in the dark barracks after lights out, Greta had whispered the plan. "When they call names," she'd said, her voice trembling, "stand beside me. Pretend to be my husband, just for today." Anna had stared at her through the faint silver light slipping through the cracks of the wooden walls. "You're asking me to lie to the British?" "I'm asking you to survive," Greta answered. They had practiced it in hushed tones between the bunk rows. Anna would answer to the name Klaus Hoffman. She would stand tall, speak clearly, and trust that the chaos of war had left enough confusion in the paperwork to make the deception believable. Now, standing by the fence, Anna wasn't sure which terrified her more, the Red Cross inspector's questions, or what would happen if Greta was found out. From across the yard, a British sergeant crossed the muddy path toward the administration hut. His boots left perfect, disciplined imprints in the wet soil. Anna counted each step. 18, 19, 20. Then the loudspeaker crackled to life, its metallic voice cutting through the morning air. "All prisoners to assembly. Census inspection in 20 minutes. The words rolled through the camp like a cold wind. Women looked up from their chores. Soap slipped from hands. Conversations died. It was happening. Anna's heart thudded beneath the coarse gray fabric of her issued uniform. She thought back to the day they'd been captured, near Bologna, during the collapse of the Gothic line. They'd been clerks, nurses, drivers, auxiliaries, not soldiers. Yet none of that mattered when the British tanks appeared through the fog, engines growling, guns raised. She remembered the Scottish lieutenant's shock when he'd realized they were all women. "Auxiliaries," his sergeant had muttered, flipping through their papers. "No weapons, no weapons. Just women dragged into a war that chewed up everything. Soldiers, cities, truth itself." The transport to England had taken 4 days. A merchant vessel turned prison ship. The hold smelled of salt, sweat, and sickness. When the hatch opened and the gulls cried over the white cliffs of Dover, some of the women wept, not from fear, but from disbelief that the world could still look so peaceful somewhere. Then came the buses, the fences, the rules. Camp 168, Wiltshire, England. At first they had expected cruelty. Instead, they'd been met with a strange, unnerving kindness. Real food, clean cuts, hot tea, and that first night a square of chocolate, Cadbury printed in elegant English script. Anna had stared at it in her palm, too afraid to eat. That small mercy had shaken her more than any threat ever could, because kindness from an enemy forces you to question everything you've been taught. Now, as the wind whipped through the laundry lines, Anna saw Greta's face, pale, drawn, determined. Beneath the exhaustion was something fierce, a will to survive, not just for herself, but for the husband she'd lost and the memory of a life that had burned away with Hamburg. "Remember," Greta murmured, wringing the last of the water from her shirt. "If they ask, you are Klaus. Say it clearly. They won't question if you look certain." Anna nodded, though her stomach knotted so tightly it felt like rope. "And if they do, then it ends," Greta said simply. "And I'll face it." The camp loudspeaker blared again. "All prisoners to the mess hall." The women moved in lines, gray uniforms blending into the mist. The British sergeant held open the door as they entered the hall. Polite, distant, efficient. On one wall, a Red Cross flag fluttered, its crimson symbol bright against the dull gray interior. Greta squeezed Anna's hand once, briefly, before letting go. "Thank you," she whispered. Anna didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had gone dry. In a few minutes, an inspector with wire-rimmed glasses and a ledger would ask questions in English, and a translator would turn them into German. And when he asked for Klaus Hoffman, Anna would stand up and gamble both their fates on a lie. She didn't know it yet, but what happened that morning and that small, impossible act of mercy wrapped inside deception would outlive the war itself. It would become a story passed in whispers through the decades. A moment when two women, cornered by a system built on categories and paperwork, found a way to reclaim their humanity. And it all began with a single, desperate plea. "Please, British sir, pretend to be my husband." The loudspeaker cracked to life just after dawn. "All prisoners to assembly. Census inspection in 20 minutes." The sound echoed off the brick walls of Camp 168, carried through cold corridors that smelled faintly of soap and coal smoke. Anna Schultz froze with her hands in the wash basin, water dripping from her fingers. Greta Hoffman stood beside her, wringing out a towel that no longer needed wringing. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The day had come. Outside, the morning fog still clung to the fences, softening the harsh geometry of barbed wire and watchtowers. British guards moved briskly, calling roll, their boots crunching on gravel. Somewhere a piano note sounded. A few hesitant chords from the common hall where Margaret, the nurse-turned-musician, practiced before work duty. The sound felt almost absurdly gentle against the tension threading through the camp. Anna's heart thudded as she pulled on her gray shift, fingers fumbling at the buttons. "Remember," she whispered, "stand beside me, not behind." Greta nodded. "And I'll do it," Anna said quickly. "I'll say it." They joined the line of women filing into the mess hall, the air thick with steam and nerves. Some tried to smile, to act as though this inspection were routine. Others kept their eyes on the ground. The Red Cross visits were supposed to mean fairness, proof that the prisoners were treated humanely. But everyone knew inspections could change everything. One wrong answer, one misfiled form, and you could be transferred, interrogated, lost in the labyrinth of the Allied system. Greta's palms were slick. Her stomach clenched so tightly she thought she might faint before they even reached the tables. She glanced at Anna, whose posture was rigid, composed, almost defiant. For a moment, Greta felt ashamed of her own fear. This was her lie, her request, yet Anna would carry the risk. At the far end of the hall, a long table had been set up beneath a bare electric bulb. 3 men sat behind it. The inspector, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, flipped through a stack of papers, methodical, unhurried. Beside him, Major Campbell, the camp commandant, watched with mild detachment. And standing slightly to the side was a translator, a British officer with a limp, his accent careful and precise. The first prisoner stepped forward. Questions in English, answers in German, names, birthplaces, next of kin. The pencil scratched, the papers shuffled. It moved with the rhythm of bureaucracy, slow, inevitable. Anna and Greta were seated near the back. Every new voice tightened the knot in Greta's chest. When the woman beside her stood, she whispered, "I can't breathe." Anna touched her arm lightly. "You'll be fine. Just breathe when I do." Finally, their turn came. The inspector looked up. "Name?" "Greta Hoffman." "Age?" 26. "Marital status?" Greta hesitated. The pause was small, but the inspector's pen stopped mid-motion. "Married," she said. Her voice was steady. "Married. Husband's name?" "Klaus Hoffman, machinist, Hamburg." The inspector glanced down at his file, then frowned. "These records indicate he was killed during an air raid." Greta felt her throat close. Her vision blurred. She didn't know if she could speak without betraying herself. That was when Anna stood. Not abruptly, calmly, as if this were a conversation she had every right to enter. "I can clarify," she said in halting English. 3 heads turned. The commandant arched an eyebrow. "I am Klaus Hoffman," Anna continued. There was confusion. "We were separated during transfer from Italy. 2 files, same name. Clerical error." The inspector blinked. "You are her husband?" Anna nodded once. "Yes," her voice didn't waver. "Married?" 6 years. The translator hesitated before rendering her words into English for the inspector. Campbell gave a non-committal grunt. The inspector exhaled sharply, tired. The ledger in front of him was thin, incomplete. Dozens of such inconsistencies must have crossed his desk that morning. He made a small note. Very well. We'll verify later. And that was it. He moved to the next prisoner. The pencil scratched again. Greta sat frozen, her breath caught halfway between a sob and a gasp. Anna lowered herself back onto the bench, her pulse hammering so hard she thought her ribs might crack. For several seconds, neither of them moved. When the inspector reached the far end of the hall, Greta finally whispered, "He believed it." "For now," Anna murmured. "Don't look relieved. They might look back." They stayed that way until the inspection concluded and the prisoners were dismissed. Outside, the sun had burned through the fog. The air smelled faintly of soap, coal, and the faint sweetness of spring thaw. Anna and Greta walked toward the laundry building, careful to keep their expressions neutral under the watchful eyes of the guards. When they finally reached the safety of the steaming washroom, Greta sank onto a stool. "I can't believe you did that," she whispered. Anna wrung out a sheet, her hands trembling slightly. "Neither can I." "You risked punishment, solitary, even transfer." Anna shrugged. "You asked me to." Greta looked at her, tears brimming. "Yes, but I didn't think you'd actually—" Anna cut her off. "Stop, don't thank me." "Not yet. For a long time." The only sound was the rhythmic splash of water, the hiss of the boiler, the distant hum of the camp's generator. Through the small window, Anna could see a guard smoking by the fence. His cap was tilted back, eyes half closed against the sun. He looked almost human, ordinary, and for the first time since capture, she wondered, not about punishment, not about escape, but about what it meant to lie for survival in a place where mercy might actually exist. The census was over, but the silence it left behind was louder than any marching order. For the rest of the morning, Greta worked in the sewing hut, her hands trembling so badly she pricked her finger 3 times before lunch. The sting was sharp, but the guilt was sharper. Every time she looked at the thread pulling through the cloth, she imagined it tying her to that lie, a thread of survival knotted with deceit. Sergeant Edwards, the British overseer, came by to check on their progress. He was a wiry man with kind eyes, the sort who said please and thank you as if the war hadn't hardened those words into luxuries. "Mrs. Hoffman," he said cheerfully. "Heard the census went all right. Must be a relief, eh?" Greta froze. The title hit her like a physical blow, Mrs. Hoffman. She managed a small nod, her throat dry. Edwards smiled kindly. "My brother-in-law was missing for 2 years before we heard he was alive. I hope you get news soon. The waiting's the worst part." He left before she could reply, and Greta sat there, needle-poised midair, the fabric blurring beneath her tears. That night, she told Anna everything she couldn't say aloud during the day. "He spoke to me as if I really had a husband," Greta whispered, staring at the ceiling of their dimly lit barrack. "As if Klaus were still out there somewhere. I didn't know whether to cry or laugh." Anna, lying on the bunk below, answered softly, "Maybe both." "You don't understand," Greta said. "He was kind. Genuinely kind. And that kindness is built on a lie." Anna turned over, her voice muffled. "If kindness needs truth to exist, we'd have none of it left in this world." Outside, a gust of wind rattled the barrack windows. The faint sound of a harmonica drifted from the men's compound, a tune so wistful it could have been a lullaby or a farewell. In the following weeks, Camp 168 settled back into its rhythm. Morning roll call, laundry duty, meals that were plain but nourishing, porridge, stew, bread, sometimes even butter. The women began to change subtly at first. Color returned to their cheeks. The hollow look of starvation softened into something almost human again. They began to smile, to whisper jokes in line, to hum while they worked. But for Anna and Greta, the weight of what they'd done lingered like a shadow that refused to fade. Each time the guards called roll and read Greta Hoffman, married, Anna's stomach tightened. Each time someone joked about Mrs. Hoffman's missing husband, Greta's heart lurched with the fear of being found out. The strange part was that no one seemed to suspect anything. The paperwork had been filed. The Red Cross had moved on to another camp. The lie had become fact simply because it remained unchallenged. One afternoon, as Anna sorted correspondence in the camp's administrative office, She caught a glimpse of her own forged name typed neatly into a roster. Hoffman. Klaus, a present, seeing it in black ink made her shiver. For months she had been invisible, a prisoner, a number. Now in some strange bureaucratic twist she existed again, albeit under a man's name, a ghost with official documentation. That evening, Greta found her sitting by the stove, staring into the embers. "You haven't eaten," Greta said gently. Anna didn't look up. "Do you ever think about what happens when the war ends?" "Every day? And if they find out?" Greta hesitated. "Then we face it, together." Anna smiled faintly. "Together. That word's done more for us than any flag." The next morning, a rumor spread through the camp the war was nearly over. Germany was collapsing, surrender only weeks away. The guards were quieter, less formal. The shouting stopped. Even the air felt lighter, though no one dared to celebrate openly. One evening, Sergeant Edwards approached Greta again as she was packing away her sewing kit. "You've done fine work," he said. "There's talk of letting skilled laborers stay on for the harvest. Might be better than going back right away." Greta froze. "Stay? Here?" He nodded. "It's not official yet, but it'll come. England's short on workers. Good hands will be needed." When he left, Greta found Anna waiting near the fence. She told her everything. "Do you think it's possible?" Greta asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That they'd let us stay?" Anna looked at the horizon where the sun dipped behind the Wiltshire hills. "Maybe, but it would mean more lies." Greta nodded slowly. "Then we'll make them count." The next morning, the camp awoke to a different sound, laughter. From somewhere near the mess hall, someone had turned on a radio. The BBC was broadcasting Churchill's speech. Victory in Europe. The guards cheered, some wept. The prisoners stood in silence. Anna felt something hollow open inside her. Not joy, not even relief. Just a vast, aching uncertainty. Greta touched her arm. "It's over." Anna shook her head. "No, Greta, for them maybe. For us, it's just another beginning." That night, she wrote one more line in her diary. The same small, battered notebook she'd carried since capture, March 17th, 1945. "I lied to save a friend. And somehow that lie is the truest thing I've ever done." Spring came quietly to Wiltshire. One morning, the frost that had clung stubbornly to the fence posts melted under a pale sun, and for the first time in months, Anna heard birdsong again, a sound that felt almost obscene in its normalcy. The war was ending. Everyone could feel it before anyone said it aloud. The guards walked with a lighter step. Letters from home carried news of victories and peace talks. Even the food seemed to improve, thicker stew, more bread, sometimes jam. And then on May 8, 1945, it was official. The loudspeakers crackled across the yard. Major Campbell's voice came through, formal but trembling with emotion. "Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over." The prisoners froze. The sound of clanging dishes in the kitchen stopped mid-air. For a moment, no one breathed. Then the reactions came in waves. A few of the women fell to their knees, sobbing, their bodies racked with a grief too large for words. Others just stood still, their faces blank, staring at the muddy ground as though it might give them an answer. Anna felt nothing. Or perhaps she felt too much. Relief, guilt, exhaustion, all colliding in her chest until they canceled each other out. Greta simply whispered, "So that's it." That evening, the camp changed. The British guards held a small celebration, music from a radio, a crate of beer opened under the pale evening light. They invited the prisoners to listen, not to join, but no one stopped them from standing at the fence. The sound that drifted through the night wasn't victory anthems, but jazz. Soft, trembling, alive. A melody that blurred the line between joy and sorrow. Margaret, one of the nurses who'd once sung in a Bavarian choir, began to hum along. Then Elsa joined, and then Greta, her voice cracked but steady. Within minutes, the mess hall was filled with sound. German women and British soldiers singing the same songs under the same sky. For the first time, Anna didn't think of them as enemies. Later that night, she wrote in her diary, "We sang tonight." The guards clapped. One of them cried, "I don't know what to feel. Maybe this is what peace sounds like. Confusion set to music." The following days blurred into a strange limbo. Trucks arrived, bringing new orders, new lists. Repatriation was beginning. Married women were prioritized first. Women with children next. Widows last. Greta's name was not called. The census verification hadn't returned. Her marital status was still pending. Lost in the bureaucratic fog, Anna wanted to be relieved the longer they stayed, the safer they were, but she could see what it did to Greta. Every time the buses left, she stood by the wire fence, clutching the cold metal, watching them disappear down the lane toward Southampton. "They'll send for us soon," Anna said one morning, though she didn't believe it. Greta shook her head. "Send us where?" "There's nothing left. Hamburg." "Hamburg is ash," Greta said quietly. "My parents' home, gone, Klaus gone. What's the point of returning to ruins?" Anna didn't answer. She thought of Leipzig, of her sister who'd last written months ago describing cellars filled with smoke and hunger. Maybe Greta was right. Maybe there was nothing left to go back to. The camp grew emptier each week. Fewer faces at breakfast, more vacant cots. Yet for those who remained, something unexpected began to form. The routines that had once felt like prison rituals began to feel like rhythms of life. The guards no longer barked orders. They spoke to them like neighbors. Some women worked in nearby farms harvesting barley and wheat in exchange for coins. Others repaired uniforms or knitted scarves for local families. Camp 168 was no longer just a camp. It was a halfway world between captivity and freedom, between past and future. One afternoon, a local photographer came to take identification pictures for repatriation records. When it was Anna's turn, he positioned her against a white wall and told her to look straight at the lens. She did, and for a fleeting moment she didn't look like a prisoner. She looked like someone about to begin again. That evening, Greta sat beside her in the barracks, the last light of day fading through the window. "If we could stay," Greta said softly, "would you?" Anna hesitated. "Stay here? In England?" "Yes, work, rebuild, live." Anna smiled faintly. "Under whose name?" "Klaus Hoffman?" Greta looked at her, eyes glistening. "Maybe both of ours. Maybe we start new ones." For the first time in years, Anna laughed. It wasn't a sound of joy exactly. More like disbelief breaking the surface of sorrow. "You and your impossible dreams," Greta smiled back. "Impossible dreams are the only ones worth having after a war." Outside, the camp lights flickered on one by one, dotting the compound like stars. The war was over, but the story wasn't. Not for them. Because surviving peace, they were learning, was a different kind of battle. Quieter, lonelier, and far more complicated. Anna reached for the diary at her bedside and wrote a single line. May 8, 1945. "The war ended today, but I'm still waiting to feel free." The summer of 1945 unfolded like a waking dream. The hedgerows around Camp 168 turned green, the air filled with the smell of cut grass and warm earth. Beyond the fences, Wiltshire's rolling fields shimmered under the English sun, impossibly peaceful compared to the ruins of Europe they had left behind. The war was over. But for Anna and Greta, peace didn't mean freedom. Their names weren't on any transport lists. The Red Cross inspector hadn't returned. The paperwork verifying Greta's husband was buried somewhere in the labyrinth of Allied bureaucracy. They existed in a quiet administrative limbo, not prisoners. Not civilians, just waiting. And in that strange pause, life began again. Anna was assigned to the camp's clerical office, now repurposed for demobilization work. She typed letters for officers, processed requisition forms, and filled out endless lists of prisoners cleared for release. She'd always been efficient, disciplined, precise, but now there was something softer in her movements, a patience she didn't recognize from her former self. Greta continued in the sewing workshop. Her stitches were neat and strong, repairing not just torn fabric but the rhythm of her own hands, the muscle memory of usefulness. Sometimes she worked on civilian clothes brought in from nearby towns, a quiet acknowledgement that the British were beginning to trust them. Sergeant Edwards still supervised the workshop. His tone had changed. There was less formality now, more warmth. He brought them real thread from town. Sometimes tea biscuits when supplies allowed. No one called Greta Mrs. Hoffman anymore, but no one questioned it either. The fiction had become part of the fabric of daily life, a lie so old it had lost its sharpness, fading into something almost tender. One afternoon, as she sewed a torn sleeve, Greta said softly, "Do you ever think about what comes next?" Anna didn't look up from her papers. "Next? When they finally remember us, when the buses come again, Anna shrugged. Maybe they won't, maybe that's our luck. Greta smiled faintly. Luck, strange word for prisoners. By autumn, Camp 168 had begun to empty for real. Barbed wire fences were quietly dismantled. The watchtowers stood unmanned. The few women who remained were allowed to walk beyond the yard, to attend Sunday services in town, even to work small jobs under escort. Wiltshire locals, who had once eyed them with suspicion, began to wave as they passed. A grocer's wife left extra bread loaves at the camp gate. The doctor in town treated Elsa's pneumonia without charge. Small kindnesses, ordinary gestures, but for women who had lived years under suspicion, they felt miraculous. Then, in October 1945, a letter arrived for Greta. It was battered and creased, the ink smudged from rain. The envelope had been redirected through several offices, marked Displaced Persons Camp, Bavaria. Inside was a single page. It was from her sister-in-law, Helga. Greta, I don't know if this will reach you, but I must try. Hamburg is gone. I'm alive, the children too. We are trying to get to America, Chicago, where my cousin lives. If you are still in England, maybe you can stay. Don't come back here. There is nothing left. Greta read it 3 times before handing it silently to Anna. Anna read the letter, folded it neatly, and set it on the table between them. What will you do? She asked. I don't know, Greta whispered. Chicago sounds like something from a storybook. England feels not home, but closer to it than what's left of Germany. The question lingered for weeks, until the answer began to take shape not through decision, but through inertia. The camp didn't close that winter, nor the next spring. The British authorities, overwhelmed by the sheer number of refugees and returning soldiers, allowed Camp 168 to linger as a kind of halfway house. By the time it was officially dissolved in April 1946, Anna and Greta had already secured work permits, Greta as a seamstress for a tailor in Devizes, Anna as a clerk for the local council. They moved into a small rented room above a bakery, sharing everything: meals, work, silence. No one asked about their past. No one questioned why their papers listed the same surname. Years passed. The war receded into memory, though it never truly disappeared. Photographs faded, uniforms vanished, and the world rebuilt itself. Then in 1968, a historian from the Imperial War Museum arrived in Salisbury, collecting oral testimonies from former prisoners of war. Anna Schultz, now 64, gray-haired, composed, working as a librarian, agreed to speak. She told the story clearly, almost clinically. The capture in Italy, the voyage to England, the daily life of the camp. But when the interviewer asked her for her most vivid memory, Anna hesitated. The chocolate, she said at last, that first night. The soldier who handed it to me said, "Welcome." I thought he was mocking us, but he wasn't, and that was harder to understand than cruelty. The interviewer asked what she meant. Anna smiled faintly. We were prepared to be hated. That's what the war had taught us, that hatred was natural, even moral. But kindness, she paused. Kindness is harder. It demands something. It makes you question everything you believed. She spoke of Greta, though not by name, a friend who had lost her husband. A census, a lie told to survive, a small rebellion written not in violence but in care. When asked if she regretted anything, Anna said quietly, "Regret is the wrong word. I regret the war, yes, but not staying, not choosing to live." Greta Hoffman died in 1975. Anna lived another 7 years. When she passed, she was buried beside Greta in a small cemetery outside Devizes. Their headstone carried both their names, Anna Schultz Hoffman and Greta Hoffman Schultz, beneath a single inscription. They gave us chocolate and we learned to live again. Visitors sometimes asked what it meant. Locals would smile and say, "It's a war story, one of the good ones." But those who knew, the few who remembered Camp 168, the census, the lie, the small act of mercy that had saved 2 women from being forgotten, understood perfectly. Because survival isn't always about defiance. Sometimes it's about choosing to accept kindness, even from the hands you were taught to hate. The war ended long ago. The fences came down. The uniforms were packed away. But the story of Anna and Greta never really ended. It just slipped quietly into the folds of history. carried only by the few who remembered what kindness looked like when the world was built on cruelty. Their story isn't one of grand battles or medals. It's not about generals, tanks, or victory parades. It's about two women standing at a fence on a cold March morning, terrified and desperate, and one of them whispering, "Please, pretend to be my husband." A lie so small, and yet it became everything. A shield against bureaucracy, a bridge between enemies, a choice that turned survival into something almost sacred. For decades, the official record said nothing about them. No entry in war logs, no photo in the archives. But history lives in quieter places, in diaries, in unmarked graves, in the way one woman learned to sew again, and another learned to trust her own hands enough to write. When Anna said, "They gave us chocolate and we learned to live again," she wasn't talking about food. She was talking about humanity. The fragile, dangerous act of seeing your enemy as human again. That's what this story reminds us. Wars end when people choose to be kind, even when they have every reason not to be. And sometimes, the most powerful rebellion isn't in defiance, it's in forgiveness. If this story moved you, or if it made you stop and think about what it means to survive with dignity, help us keep these forgotten voices alive. Like this video so others can find it. Subscribe to uncover more hidden stories the textbooks left behind. And share this story, and because the world still needs reminders that kindness, even in war, can change everything. These were the women who faced hunger, fear, and loss, and somehow still found a way to be human, and that's the quietest kind of courage there is.